The sound of 30 strangers splashing in her backyard pool made Sarah's blood run cold. Through her kitchen window, she watched the HOA president setting up a buffet table on her deck. Her deck wild children, she'd never seen before, into water she paid to heat. Margaret Chen stood by the gate like a smug bouncer, clipboard in hand, directing traffic into Sarah's private sanctuary. But Margaret had made one fatal mistake. She'd forgotten who controlled the pool's main power switch. Sarah's finger hovered over the red button, her smile spreading wider than Margaret's about-to-be humiliation. Sometimes the best revenge came with a simple flick of a switch. Sarah Mitchell had always prided herself on being reasonable, tall, and never once painted her shutters without pre-approval. She followed the rules because rules, she believed, kept their little suburban paradise running smoothly, which was why finding 30 strangers in her backyard felt like discovering aliens had landed on her lawn. "What the hell?" Sarah dropped, her grocery bags on the kitchen counter, oranges rolling across the granite as she stared through the sliding glass door. Her kidney-shaped pool, the one she'd saved 3 years to install, was packed with splashing children and lounging adults she'd never seen before in her life. Gut was manning her gas grill, flipping burgers like he owned the place. 3 teenagers had claimed her pool chairs, their wet towels draped over the cushions she'd bought just last month. Sarah's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. But before she could dial 911, she spotted a familiar figure by the pool gate, Margaret Chen, the HOA president, standing like a general surveying her troops. Margaret wore a crisp white sundress and oversized sunglasses, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun that made her look like a disappointed school principal. She held a clipboard, because of course she did, and was checking off names as more families streamed through. Sarah left for the grocery store an hour ago. Sarah yanked open the sliding door, so hard it rattled in its frame. The sounds hit her like a physical force, children shrieking with delight, adults laughing, the steady hum of her pool filter working overtime. "Margaret?" Sarah's voice cracked like a whip across the chaos. "What the hell is going on here?" Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A woman holding a plate of potato salad froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. The man at the grill looked up from the burgers. Grease spattering his Hawaiian shirt, Margaret Chen turned slowly, her expression shifting from surprise to that practiced look of patient authority that made Sarah's skin crawl. She walked over with measured steps, her smile never wavering. "Sarah, perfect timing. I was just about to come find you." Margaret's voice carried that sickeningly sweet tone she used when she was about to deliver bad news wrapped in fake politeness. "I hope you don't mind. I took the liberty of organizing a little community gathering, mind." Sarah's voice pitched higher. "You broke into my backyard and invited half the neighborhood to use my pool without asking me. Now, Margaret held up one manicured hand. "Let's not be dramatic. According to Section 12.4 of our HOA bylaws, any community enhancement that promotes neighborhood unity falls under the purview of the board's discretionary authority. It means," Margaret said, her smile turning sharp, "that your pool area was designated as a community asset during last month's board meeting. The meeting you missed, I might add. I was at my mother's funeral." "Yes, well, attendance is attendance." Margaret made a note on her clipboard. The vote was unanimous among present members. Your backyard pool area is now classified as a shared neighborhood amenity, available for scheduled community events. The words hit Sarah like ice water. Around them, the party continued. Someone had turned on music, and a group of kids was playing Marco Polo in the shallow end, her shallow end. In her pool, you can't decide my private property is suddenly community property. Actually, we can. Margaret's voice dropped to that quiet, dangerous tone that meant she was done pretending to be nice. Section 12.4 clearly states that any amenity that significantly enhances property values within the community may be reclassified for shared use if deemed beneficial to the neighborhood as a whole. That's insane. This is my house, and this is our community. Margaret gestured toward the families scattered around Sarah's backyard. "My fees don't maintain my pool. I pay for that myself. Your pool that increases everyone's property values. Your pool that makes our neighborhood more desirable. Your pool that, according to county records, was installed using a permit that required HOA architectural approval." Margaret's smile widened. A permit that, I noticed, was never properly filed. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? I did some digging after Mrs. Patterson mentioned how lovely your pool area looked. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that while you filed for the county permit, you never submitted the required HOA architectural review application. That's a violation of our CC&R, Sarah, a pretty serious one. The implications hit Sarah like a sledgehammer. An unpermitted pool installation could mean fines, legal action, even being forced to fill in the pool entirely. 3 years of savings, gone. Her dream of lazy summer evenings floating in her own backyard, destroyed. But I thought the county permit was enough. TSK. Margaret made another note. I'm prepared to overlook this violation. Consider it grandfathered in as long as you're willing to be a good neighbor about sharing. Around them, the party was gaining momentum. Someone had set up a volleyball net across the pool. A group of women was arranging casserole dishes on Sarah's patio table. Kids were diving for pool toys that definitely weren't hers. How often? Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. Pardon, how often would these community events ... happen? Margaret consulted her clipboard. Well, let's see. The Johnsons requested use for their anniversary party next weekend. Oh, and the community 4th of July party is scheduled for the 4th of July is 3 weeks away. Yes, and it's going to be wonderful. I've already ordered the decorations. Red, white, and blue streamers would look lovely around your pool area, don't you think? Sarah looked around her backyard, at strangers eating food she hadn't provided, swimming in water she paid to heat, using electricity she'd be billed for. A woman was taking selfies by Sarah's prize-winning rose bushes. A man was smoking a cigar near her vegetable garden. This wasn't sharing. This was theft dressed up in community spirit and legal jargon. And if I refuse, Margaret's smile turned predatory. Well, then we'd have to address the permit issue through proper channels. The Architectural Review Board would need to assess whether your pool installation meets current standards. There might be fines involved, legal fees. You might even need to make costly modifications to bring everything up to code. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. Margaret stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Sarah could hear. You can be a team player, or you can be a problem. But I should warn you, I've been HOA president for 8 years, and problems have a way of ... multiplying ... around here. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She thought about her mortgage, still 5 years from being paid off. Her job at the accounting firm that barely covered her expenses, the savings account she'd emptied to build this pool, her one indulgence in an otherwise carefully budgeted life. She thought about her mother's funeral 3 weeks ago, how she'd sat alone in the front pew because her father had died 2 years earlier and she had no siblings, how she'd come home to this house, this pool, as her one sanctuary in a world that felt increasingly hostile and lonely. And now Margaret Chen was taking that away too. Fine, Sarah said through gritted teeth, but I want a schedule. I want to know exactly when these events are happening, of course. Margaret's smile turned brilliant. I'll email you the calendar. We're very organized, I assure you. She turned to address the crowd, raising her voice. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Sarah, our gracious host. A smattering of applause rippled through the group. A few people waved. Someone called out, Thanks for sharing your beautiful pool. Sarah forced a smile and waved back, her face feeling like it might crack from the effort. Inside, rage was building like pressure in a boiler, hot and dangerous, and looking for an outlet. Margaret leaned in close again. See, isn't this nice? Community spirit at its finest. But as Margaret walked away to organize what looked like a pool volleyball tournament, tucked behind her rose bushes, barely visible from the pool area, the shed that housed the main electrical panel for her pool system, the shed that contained the master switch for everything pumps, heater, lights, the fancy the scream that erupted from the pool area could have shattered glass. Sarah stood in the darkness of her utility shed, her hand still gripping the main power switch, listening to 30 voices raised in panic and confusion. The underwater lights had died instantly, plunging the pool into murky twilight. The filtration system's steady hum cut off like a severed breath. Most dramatically, the pool's sound system, which had been pumping out classic rock at a volume that probably violated 3 noise ordinances went silent with an electronic death rattle. What happened? Someone shouted, "The power's out. I can't see anything. Where are the lights?" Sarah pressed her face to the small window of the utility shed, watching chaos unfold in her backyard. In the gathering dusk, she could make out figures stumbling around the pool deck, parents frantically calling for their children, and Margaret Chen standing frozen by the deep end. Her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. The 12-year-old boy who'd watched Sarah enter the shed was pointing in her direction, tugging on his mother's sleeve. But in the confusion, his words were lost in the symphony of panic. "Everyone, stay calm." Margaret's voice cut through the noise, but there was a tremor in it that hadn't been there during her earlier power play. "It's probably just a blown fuse." Sarah almost laughed. If only it were that simple. She slipped out of the shed and locked it behind her, pocketing the key. In the darkness, no one noticed her emergence from behind the rose bushes. She walked casually toward the chaos, putting on her best concerned homeowner expression. "Oh my goodness," she called out, injecting just the right amount of surprise into her voice. "What happened?" "The power went out," said the woman in the lime green bikini, who was now shivering and dripping wet beside the pool. "Everything just ... died." "That's so strange," Sarah mused, pulling out her phone and turning on its flashlight. "The house still has power. Look, all the windows are lit up." Indeed, her kitchen and living room lights blazed cheerfully through the sliding glass doors, a stark contrast to the dark pool area. Several people turned to stare, confusion evident on their faces. "How is that possible?" asked the man who'd been grilling burgers. He was still holding a spatula, looking lost without his cooking station. "Different circuits," Sarah explained helpfully. "The pool system runs on its own electrical panel. It must have tripped." Margaret appeared at her elbow, moving faster than Sarah had ever seen the older woman move. Even in the dim glow of phone flashlights, Sarah could see the panic in the HOA president's eyes. "Can you fix it?" Margaret demanded. "I can try," Sarah said, making a show of looking around the darkened pool area. "But the electrical panel is in my utility shed, and I think I left the key inside the house. Let me go look for it." "How long will that take?" Sarah pretended to consider this. "Well, I have a lot of keys. Could be 5 minutes, could be an hour. You know how these things go." She could practically feel Margaret's blood pressure spiking. Around them, the party was rapidly disintegrating. Kids were complaining about being cold. Adults were gathering their belongings in the insufficient light of phone screens. Someone's toddler had started Krianja's thin, piercing wail that cut through the evening air like a siren. "Mommy, I'm scared," a little girl whimpered, clinging to her mother's leg. "It's okay, sweetheart," the mother soothed, but her voice was tight with her own anxiety. "We're going home now, but I don't want to leave. We were having fun. The party's over." "Honey." Sarah watched families packing up in the darkness, stumbling over pool chairs, and bumping into each other as they navigated the unfamiliar terrain of her backyard without proper lighting. Part of her felt a twinge of guilt. Some of these people were genuinely nice, just following Margaret's lead. The kids especially hadn't done anything wrong except an invitation to swim. But then she remembered Margaret's smug expression when she'd revealed the permit trap, the casual way the HOA president had threatened her home, her security, her one remaining sanctuary. The clipboard and the fake smile and the assumption that Sarah would just roll over and accept this invasion. The guilt evaporated like chlorine in sunlight. "Sarah," Margaret hissed, grabbing her arm. "You need to fix this." "Now, I'm doing my best," Sarah replied innocently. "These old electrical systems can be tricky. This is a disaster. People are leaving. Well, yes, it's hard to have a pool party without pool lights, or music, or..." Sarah gestured toward the grill where the man in the Hawaiian shirt was packing up his half-cooked burgers, or working appliances. Margaret's grip tightened. "If you don't fix this immediately, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that involve architectural review boards and permit violations, and very expensive legal proceedings." Sarah met Margaret's eyes in the darkness. "You know what, Margaret? Bring it on." The HOA president's mouth fell open. "Excuse me?" I said, "Bring it on." Sarah's voice was calm, almost conversational. "File your complaints, schedule your reviews, call your lawyers. But while you're doing all that, remember one thing." She stepped closer, close enough that Margaret had to strain to hear her words. Over the continuing chaos, this is still my house, my property, my electrical system. And if you think you can blackmail me into turning my home into your personal party venue, you're about to learn just how wrong you are. Margaret's face flushed, red even in the dim light. You can't do this. There are 30 people here, families with children. Then maybe you should have asked permission before inviting them to someone else's private property. The HOA bylaws clearly state, the HOA bylaws don't override basic property rights, Sarah interrupted, and they definitely don't give you the right to break into my backyard and throw parties without my consent. I didn't break in. I have a master key for community assets. Sarah blinked. You have a what? Margaret realized her mistake immediately, but it was too late. The board voted to ... You made copies of my keys. Sarah's voice rose, carrying across the pool area. Several people stopped their packing to listen. You copied my house keys without my permission. Not your house keys, just the gate. Who authorized that? The board. When last month's meeting, the meeting I missed because I was burying my mother, the words hung in the air like a curse. Around them, the exodus had slowed as more people tuned in to the confrontation. In the darkness, Sarah could make out faces turning in their direction, voices dropping to whispers. Sarah, please, let's discuss this privately. Oh, now you want privacy. After you invited 30 strangers to use my pool without asking. After you copied my keys. After you blackmailed me with permit violations. Sarah's voice was gaining volume and venom with each word. Tell me, Margaret, what else have you been doing with those copied keys? How many times have you been in my backyard when I wasn't home? That's not. I would never... Margaret was backpedaling now, literally taking steps away from Sarah's advancing figure. Really? Because you seemed awfully familiar with my property? Layout? You knew exactly where to set up your buffet table. You knew which gate to use. You even knew my grill settings. The man grilling brought his own equipment preferences. Bullshit. The profanity cracked across the pool area like a whip. You've been back here before. How many times, Margaret? How many times have you let yourself into my yard to play HOA inspector? The silence that followed was broken only by the crying, toddler, and the sound of someone dropping a cooler in their haste to leave. Margaret looked around desperately, as if searching for support from the departing families. She found none. If anything, people were moving faster now, clearly uncomfortable with witnessing what was rapidly becoming a very public destruction of their HOA president. You know what? Sarah continued, her voice dropping back to that deadly calm. I'm glad this happened. I'm glad you showed your true colors in front of everyone, because now they know exactly what kind of person runs their homeowners association. She turned to address the remaining party guests, raising her voice to carry across the dark pool area. For anyone who's wondering, Margaret Chen copied my gate keys without my permission, let herself into my private property, and organized this party without asking me or even telling me it was happening. When I objected, she threatened to report me for permit violations unless I agreed to let the HOA use my backyard whenever they wanted. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped. A man's voice called out, "Is that true?" Margaret's face had gone from red to white. Sarah, you're making this sound worse than it is, am I? Because it sounds pretty bad to me. Sarah pulled out her phone. In fact, it sounds like breaking and entering. Maybe I should call the police and let them sort it out. Don't be ridiculous. Sarah's finger hovered over the emergency call button. 3.2. Wait! Margaret practically shrieked. Everyone, please don't leave. This is just a misunderstanding. But it was too late. The mass exodus had become a stampede. Families were grabbing their belongings and heading for the gate. En masse, clearly wanting no part of whatever illegal drama was about to unfold. The volleyball net lay abandoned in the dark pool water. Abandoned plates of food covered the patio table like offerings to some vengeful god. Within 10 minutes, Sarah's backyard was empty except for herself and Margaret Chen. The two women stood facing each other across the... She stumbled to her bedroom window, still groggy from a restless night, and peered through the blinds. 3 men in hard hats were setting up construction barriers on the sidewalk in front of her house. A city truck was parked behind them, orange. Cones scattered across the street like traffic confetti. What the hell? Sarah grabbed her robe and hurried downstairs. Just as one of the workers fired up what looked like a jackhammer, the noise was deafening a percussion symphony of urban destruction that sent her neighbor's dogs into a barking frenzy. "Excuse me," she shouted over the racket. "What are you doing?" The nearest worker, a burly man with arms like tree trunks, looked up from his equipment. "Emergency." "Water main repair?" he called back. "Should be wrapped up by 5 or 6 tonight." "Tonight? It's not even 7 in the morning." "Sorry, lady. Emergency repairs take priority." Sarah's blood pressure spiked. What emergency? The water was fine yesterday, but the man had already turned back to his jackhammer, and her words were swallowed by the mechanical screaming of metal on concrete. She retreated into her house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Through her living room curtains, she could see more workers arriving, a whole convoy of city vehicles taking up every parking space on her block. Her neighbors were emerging from their houses, looking confused and annoyed as they discovered their cars were blocked in by construction equipment. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. "Having trouble sleeping, so sorry about the noise." Margaret, the message was followed by a smiley face emoji that made Sarah want to throw her phone across the room. She grabbed her laptop and pulled up the city's public works website, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she searched for any record of water main issues on Maple Grove Lane. Nothing. No scheduled repairs. No reported breaks. No emergency work orders. Another text arrived. "By the way, you might want to check your mailbox. The Architectural Review Board works so efficiently when properly motivated." Sarah's stomach dropped. She threw on clothes and rushed outside, dodging between construction workers to reach her mailbox. Inside was a thick manila envelope bearing the city seal and the words, "Architectural Review Board Urgent," stamped in red ink. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Notice of violation. Property address, 42 Maple Grove Lane. Violation, pool installation required action. Immediate cessation of pool use pending architectural review hearing date, July 8, 9 a.m. Failure to comply may result in fines up to $50,000 and/or forced removal of non-compliant structures. The hearing date was 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to find a lawyer, gather documentation, and prepare a defense against charges that could destroy her financially. "Excuse me, ma'am." One of the construction workers was waving at her. "We need you to move your car." "Not my problem. City says this whole block is a construction zone until further notice." Sarah looked around in disbelief. Orange cones now stretched from her driveway to the corner, effectively turning Maple Grove Lane into a nope irking zone. Her neighbors were standing in their driveways, looking equally bewildered as more workers arrived with increasingly large equipment. Mrs. Patterson from next door approached, her elderly face creased with worry. "Sarah, dear, do you know what's happening?" One of them headed straight for Sarah. "Ma'am, are you the property owner?" "Yes, but I'm Inspector Davis, Code Enforcement. We've received a complaint about unsafe electrical conditions on your property. I need to inspect your pool area immediately." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "What complaint?" "Anonymous tip came in this morning. Reported power outages causing dangerous conditions for community members. We take electrical safety very seriously." The inspector was already walking toward her backyard gate, his partner following with what looked like testing equipment. Sarah hurried after them, her mind racing. "Wait, you can't just—" "Actually, ma'am, we can. City Ordinance for 7B gives us authority to inspect any property where electrical hazards have been reported." Inspector Davis tried the gate handle and found it locked. "I'll need you to open this. I want to see some identification first." Both looked legitimate, which somehow made this whole situation worse. Sarah unlocked the gate with trembling fingers, and the two men strode into her backyard like they owned it. Inspector Davis pulled out a tablet and began making notes, photographing everything from the pool equipment to the utility shed. "When did you last have this electrical system inspected?" he asked. "It was inspected when the pool was installed 3 years ago by whom the county inspector." "When I got the permit, Davis and his partner exchanged glances. That would fall under city jurisdiction." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, but the contractor said, "What contractor?" She gave them the name of the pool company, and Davis made another note. "We'll need to contact them about—" their permitting process. In the meantime, I'm seeing several potential violations here. He gestured toward the pool equipment. This filtration system appears to be connected directly to your main electrical panel without proper GFCI protection. That's a serious safety hazard. It has GFCI protection. The outlet. Not the outlet, ma'am. The main connection. See this? He pointed to something Sarah couldn't identify among the tangle of wires and pipes. This should have been run through a separate subpanel with dedicated circuit breakers. Sarah stared at the equipment that had worked perfectly for 3 years. But it's been fine. Until last night, Davis said, consulting his tablet, when multiple families with children were exposed to potential electrocution during a power failure. That wasn't a safety issue. The power just went out. Electrical systems don't just go out, ma'am. Something caused that failure, and until we determine what it was, this pool area is a potential hazard. He pulled a roll of yellow tape from his bag and began stringing it around the pool deck like crime scene tape. Sarah watched in horror as her backyard was transformed into what looked like a disaster zone. You can't do this. I'm afraid I can. City Ordinance 23C allows us to restrict access to any area deemed potentially hazardous to public safety. Davis finished with the tape and turned to face her. No one uses this pool until it passes a full electrical inspection, and any necessary repairs are completed. How long will that take? Depends on what we find. Could be a few days, could be a few weeks. If there are major code violations, it could be months. In the space of 2 hours, her sanctuary had become a crime scene. Her street had become a construction zone, and her quiet Tuesday morning had become a bureaucratic nightmare. Davis handed her a business card. You'll need to hire a licensed electrician to do the repairs. What if I can't afford the repairs? Then the pool stays closed. He gathered his equipment. Sorry, ma'am. I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. As the inspectors left, Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed her office number. Sarah? It was Janet, the office manager. Where are you? You've got the Morrison account review at 9. Sarah looked around her backyard prison, at the construction chaos beyond her gate, at the violation notice crumpled in her free hand. I'll be a little late, she said. How late? Through her kitchen window, she could see another city truck pulling up. This one had environmental services painted on the side. I honestly don't know. She hung up and walked to her gate, where 2 new officials were setting up what looked like water testing equipment. Ma'am, are you the homeowner? One of them called out, We've received reports of potential chemical contamination in your pool system. We'll need to take samples. Then 20, then 50. When she opened them, Margaret Chen was standing on the sidewalk beyond the construction barriers, watching the chaos with undisguised satisfaction. The HOA president was dressed in her usual crisp white outfit, clipboard in hand, looking like a general surveying a successful siege. Their eyes met across the orange cones and construction equipment. Margaret smiled and raised her phone, snapping another photo of Sarah's house surrounded by city vehicles and yellow tape. Then, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement like a countdown timer. Sarah's phone buzzed with another text. Looks like you're having quite a day. Don't worry, it's just getting started. Community compliance is so important, don't you think? Sarah looked at the message, then at her house, then at the army of city workers dismantling her peaceful suburban life, one violation at a time. Margaret Chen had declared war. But what the HOA president didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell had spent 5th